Jonathan arrived at the cafe, eager to impress the woman he loved. He had a new suit and had practiced hard, but things went wrong. Instead of Phoebe, he faced Mark, who publicly humiliated him, hinting at his longtime flaw. Jonathan's nerves took over, leading to an embarrassing scene. Get a cup of coffee and settle down, because this story is inspiring from start to finish. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Jonathan Green, an elderly man, lived alone in a small, neat house on the city's outskirts. His life was strictly regimented. Every morning, he woke up precisely at 8 a.m., his alarm clock ringing loudly, piercing the quiet dawn. Jonathan would take a deep breath and then immediately start his daily rituals. First, he disinfected all surfaces, spraying and wiping until every inch sparkled. Next, he checked the locks and switches multiple times, his fingers trembling slightly as he flipped the light switches on and off, on and off. The door locks were tested 3 times each, ensuring they were secure. Jonathan's days were like clockwork, each minute planned and each task completed in a specific order. His routines were his comfort, a way to manage the anxiety that constantly buzzed at the edges of his mind. He often quarreled with his neighbor Bob because of Bob's cat, Mr. Whiskers, constantly roamed Jonathan's garden, digging up his carefully planted flowers. That bright morning, Jonathan was outside, meticulously tending to his garden, when he spotted Mr. Whiskers pawing at his tulips. "Bob!" Jonathan called out, his voice tight with frustration. "Your cat is at it again." Bob, a quirky man with a wide grin and a perpetually messy appearance, popped his head over the fence. So the Jonathan. Mr. Whiskers is just a free spirit, you know? He means no harm." Jonathan grumbled, shaking his head. "Keep him out of my garden, Bob. I can't have him ruining my flowers." Jonathan ate his lunch at a local cafe every day, occupying the same table by the window. The thought of someone else sitting there made his palms sweat. Phoebe, the kind-hearted waitress at the cafe, knew about this peculiarity and always tried to reserve the table for Jonathan. She was a bright spot in his otherwise anxious world, with her warm smile and gentle demeanor. "Good afternoon, Mr. Green." Phoebe greeted him as he walked in, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Your usual table is ready for you." At the sight of Phoebe, Jonathan got nervous, and his hands started to shake. He quickly sat down and began arranging the sugar packets on the table, lining them up in perfect rows to calm himself. Phoebe watched him with a soft smile, understanding his need for order. "Thank you, Phoebe," Jonathan said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Phoebe nodded and placed his usual lunch in front of him, a plate of vegetables arranged by color, with the potatoes perfectly aligned. She arranged the vegetables this way just for him, knowing it helped to calm his nerves. As he ate, Jonathan couldn't help but glance at Phoebe from time to time. She moved gracefully between the tables. Each time she looked his way and smiled, he felt a flutter of warmth in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name. Despite the rigid structure of his days, there was a small part of Jonathan that longed for something more, something beyond his routines. And though he would never admit it, Phoebe's smile was a tiny spark of light in his meticulously ordered world. On one of his regular visits to the cafe, Jonathan brought a single daisy, its white petals slightly wilted but still charming. He hid it in his pocket throughout lunch, occasionally patting it to make sure it was still there. As he finished his meal and carefully arranged his utensils, he discreetly left the crumpled flower on the table for Phoebe. As Jonathan made his way to the exit, Phoebe hurried after him. "Mr. Green, wait up," she called, her voice bright and cheerful. Jonathan paused, his heart racing. "Yes, Phoebe." Phoebe caught up to him, holding the daisy gently. "This is lovely, thank you," she said warmly. "You know, the cafe owner is planning a musical evening soon. We're looking for someone who can play the piano well. I remember you mentioning you used to play quite well. Would you consider performing?" Jonathan felt his chest tighten. He looked at his watch, his fingers tapping nervously on its face. I need to be home. It's almost time for my afternoon routine," he stammered. Phoebe's smile softened. "I understand, Mr. Green. Just think about it, okay? It would be wonderful to have you play." Jonathan nodded quickly, eager to escape the unexpected conversation. "I'll think about it," he mumbled before hurrying out the door. At home, Jonathan tried to follow his usual routine, but found himself distracted by Phoebe's words. Finally, he deviated from his schedule and sat down at the old upright piano in his living room. His fingers trembled as they hovered over the keys. He began to play, but not all the notes came out right. His anxiety grew with each mistake. Hearing the hesitant notes, Bob peeked through the window. His curiosity piqued. He knocked gently on the glass. "Hey, Jonathan, need some help?" he called out. Jonathan frowned, but opened the window a crack. "I'm fine, Bob. Just trying something." Bob grinned, undeterred. "That's awesome. Need an audience to practice on?" Jonathan sighed. "It's a foolish idea. I haven't played in years." Bob stepped back and smiled. "Nonsense. Let's work on it together. I can listen, and we can get you ready." Jonathan often struggled to play because of his obsessive thoughts, but Bob found a way to calm him. He created little funny rhyming phrases. "Tickle the ivories, just like pies," and "play the keys, no fleas, just ease." They first repeated them aloud, then to themselves. This helped Jonathan gather himself and play more steadily. For the first time in a long while, Jonathan felt a flicker of happiness, a sense of accomplishment warming his heart. He smiled, thinking that perhaps this could be his moment to shine. However, deep down, he couldn't shake off the nagging worry that his joy might be premature. The next day, Jonathan walked into the café with a slight spring in his step. However, instead of Phoebe, he saw Mark behind the counter. Mark was a young waiter, known for his sharp tongue and competitive nature. He always seemed to be trying too hard to impress, especially when Phoebe was around. Jonathan's heart sank a little, but he approached Mark. "Hello, Mark," Jonathan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Could you tell Phoebe that I agreed to perform at the musical evening?" Mark raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. "Sure, I'll let her know," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Good luck with that, old man." Ignoring the snide remark, Jonathan turned and left the cafe. He met up with Bob, who was waiting for him outside. "How'd it go?" Bob asked, noticing Jonathan's slightly flustered appearance. "Phoebe wasn't there, but I left the message with Mark," Jonathan replied, trying to shake off the unease. "Let's go get that suit." Bob nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. Let's get you looking sharp." They went to the local department store, where Bob helped Jonathan pick out a suit. Bob was like a whirlwind of energy, holding up jackets and ties, and offering opinions on colors and styles. "Try this one," Bob said, handing Jonathan a navy blue suit. "It'll bring out your eyes." Jonathan hesitated but took the suit into the dressing room. When he emerged, he felt a bit self-conscious but also a little proud. "Well, what do you think?" he asked, turning around slowly. Bob gave a thumbs up. "You look fantastic. Phoebe will be impressed for sure." After purchasing the suit, Jonathan had one more request. "Bob, can we stop by the jewelry shop? There's something I need to get." Bob's eyes widened in surprise, but nodded. "Of course, let's go." At the jewelry shop, Jonathan carefully examined the pieces on display. His hands were a bit shaky as he finally selected a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm. "This one," Jonathan said, his voice soft, "for a special woman." Bob smiled broadly. "That's a beautiful choice, Jonathan. She'll love it." Bob patted him on the back as they walked out of the shop. "Everything's going to be great, Jonathan," Bob said confidently. I'll be there to support you at the performance. You've got this." Jonathan nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks, Bob. I appreciate your help." As they headed home, Jonathan felt a flicker of hope. Yet, the biggest test for poor Jonathan was to come, and he had no inkling of what lay in wait. On the day of the performance, Jonathan arrived at the cafe, feeling a bit nervous. As he entered, he looked around for Phoebe, but saw Mark behind the counter instead. "Good afternoon, Mark. Is Phoebe here?" Jonathan asked, his voice slightly trembling. Mark smirked. "Oh, she's in the back. Why do you need her?" Jonathan took a deep breath. "I'm here for the performance. I told you to let her know." Mark's smirk widened. "All right, I must have forgotten. Besides, we decided against live music tonight. It's not really your scene, old man." Jonathan's heart sank. Just then, Phoebe came out from the back and saw Jonathan. She greeted him with a warm smile. "Mr. Green, what a pleasant surprise. I didn't know you came tonight. You look sharp today," she said, noticing his new suit. "You didn't respond to my message, but I went ahead and tuned the piano just in case." Jonathan managed a small smile, feeling a bit more at ease. "Thank you, Phoebe. I'm ready to play." Jonathan looked at Mark, who shrugged nonchalantly. Phoebe frowned but turned to Jonathan with a reassuring smile. "It's not a big deal. The piano is tuned, and you can play. Let me just inform the cafe owner." As Phoebe walked away, Mark seized the moment to mock Jonathan. "Look at you with your useless rituals. Your obsessive thoughts have no place here. You're just going to embarrass Phoebe and yourself." Jonathan's hands began to shake uncontrollably. In his panic, he knocked over a stack of dishes on a nearby table. The crash echoed through the cafe, and juice spilled onto the patrons at the neighboring table. Faces turned towards him, some with shock, others with annoyance. Feeling utterly humiliated, Jonathan ran out of the cafe, his vision blurred with tears. Bob was just entering the cafe, having arrived a bit late. As he stepped through the door, he and Jonathan collided, nearly knocking each other over. "Whoa, Jonathan, what happened?" Bob asked, seeing the distress on Jonathan's face. Jonathan, struggling to catch his breath, tried to explain. "Mark, he didn't tell Phoebe. They weren't expecting me to play, and he mocked me. I knocked everything over." "Jonathan, calm down," Bob said, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Remember our rhymes from the rehearsals. Repeat them with me." Together, they closed their eyes and chanted the calming phrases. "Tickle the ivories just like pies, and play the keys, no fleas, just ease." Gradually, Jonathan's breathing steadied, and the panic ebbed away. Despite the anger and confusion inside the cafe, he felt a new resolve forming within him. Bob gave him an okay sign. "You've got this, Jonathan. Don't let Mark or anyone else stop you." Jonathan, still murmuring the calming rhymes, walked back into the cafe, ignoring the stares and whispers. He made his way to the piano, his focus entirely on the keys in front of him. The cafe owner moved to intervene, but Phoebe quickly stepped in. "Please let him play. I'll take responsibility for whatever happens next," she pleaded the owner. Summoning all his strength, Jonathan began to play. The first notes were shaky, but as he continued, his confidence grew. The music flowed beautifully, filling the cafe with a serene melody. The chatter died down, and everyone listened, captivated by his performance. As the last note faded, Jonathan faced the audience. "I have OCD," he began, his voice steady. "But today, I overcame my fears and my need for daily rituals to take a step forward. I want to thank Bob for helping me find a new way to calm myself. And I even thank Mark for the obstacles he put in my path because they made me stronger." He turned to the cafe owner and the patrons. "I apologize for the chaos earlier and promise to cover the costs." The cafe erupted in applause, and Jonathan felt a wave of relief wash over him. Mark slipped out quietly, his head down, while Jonathan approached Phoebe, who was beaming with pride. He took out the small box and handed it to her. "Phoebe, this is for you. And would you go out with me on a real date?" Phoebe's eyes sparkled as she opened the box to reveal the bracelet. "Yes, Jonathan. I'd love to." From a distance, Bob watched with a satisfied smile. Jonathan had not only faced his fears, but had also found the courage to pursue his happiness.